Hi guys, Gilly Hunt here, coming to you with my A to Z guide to Stampin' Up products, and we're up to E for extra sharp and extra sticky, which is a bit of a cheat because it's not really E's, but I had an awful lot of S's to get rid of through the system. So we're on extra sharp and sticky, and we're not going to cover every single sharp and sticky thing from the catalogue, but I'm going to make a good go at all the probably the most important ones for you if you were a beginner, and hopefully to give out, as usual, some good little tips and tricks for those of you that are a bit more experienced. Okay, so let's start off with probably the most important extra sharp thing you need, which is a great pair of scissors. And these are extra sharp, really extra sharp, and that's why they have a wonderful cover on. And these are the snips from Stampin' Up. And as usual, all the things I'm going to talk about are available at my shop, gillyhunt.com. So here are these extra sharp scissors. Now, why are they special? Well, I just want to show you them compared to another couple of pairs of scissors. I didn't have any quite as small as this, but I've chosen two medium-sized pairs of scissors, and these are a medium-sized pair of scissors to make the comparison with. This is a very cheap and simple pair, and this is a more expensive pair from a craft shop. So we're kind of comparing, you know, similar things. First and foremost, if you look when they are closed, that the very cheaper pair has quite a blunt end on here. What I mean by is the sort of the distance covered. If I show you that sort of distance when they're closed. Ooh, where am I going? Hang on. Oh, I've lost track of the camera. There we go. Sorry about that. There's the end, which is sort of slightly blunted off. Now you come to the Stampin' Up pair, and the end is quite sharp. It comes to quite a tight point. Okay, there's that little pointy bit. And the craft pair has an in-betweeny. So that's not too important. It is important because it allows you to go in and out of little tiny pieces. It allows you just to make that little initial chip in. But here is the vital piece. I want you to compare the actual width of the blade itself. So let me just open them all up and show you. Now, when I say the blade itself, I mean this piece here, the width of the cutting part. Okay. Now, on both of these pairs of scissors, you will find quite a wide distance. I don't know what we call it. Width. Distance, width. But they're quite wide. Okay. They're wide and flat. Now I want to show you the Stampin' Up one alongside it, and these are called our snips. And look how narrow, and it's quite hard even to see how narrow they are. Look how narrow that is across there. If I put my hands either side, that's a very tiny, 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 tiny thin blade compared to if I put my hands. Let's just take one of these two. In fact, I've taken this. See how wide that is there? And see how narrow that is there. And that's the important piece. And I'm going to show you why. Look what happens if I take a couple of pieces of card. So I've got a piece of card here. Two pieces exactly the same. You just see me tear it in half, so you know I haven't cheated, I haven't added anything to it. And what happens if I use a standard pair of scissors, right? If I do a zigzag, which is what we're doing mostly when we're cutting, we're often doing zigzags. Look what happens as I go round the zig and the zag. Let's go again. And I'm not doing anything different or difficult than I will be doing in a minute with the other scissors. Okay, so yes, they cut. They're nice and sharp. I haven't got a blunt pair here, but look what happens to the actual surfaces. That as you go round the corners, it pulls at and buckles up the paper. Okay, I'm going to show you the same again on with the other pair of scissors, just to prove that it's not just because I've used the cheapest pair. I'm going to do exactly the same with this pair. and look what's happening. Exactly the same. It's pulling and we're not getting a nice fine line. Okay, now that's because the width of the blade doesn't allow you to turn because it pulls. Okay, now let's get rid of those rubbishy ones and let's go to the snips. Now watch what happens here. And I'm doing it exactly the same. I'm trying to be really, I'm trying to be really sensible and do it exactly the same way. We'll go for some really tight ones so that I can prove that it's, you know, it's not just because we've done them big and bold. Right, now if we look carefully at those lines, look how sharp and clean and crisp those are. Now I was doing that in quite a hurry. In fact, you can see there where I sort of went with the scissors. That's me with the scissors, not the actual scissors. Okay, but we've got generally a very sharp, crisp line. And if I'm really careful, and if I go really slowly, I can even double back on myself. I'm going to do a really, I'm trying to get it under the camera, sorry. I'm going to even do it really complicated, and I'll just finish it off like that to show you. Look how smart a line that is. Let's get it in focus. There we go, camera, well done. Okay, and that's because we've used this very thin, narrow blade. So I would say that if you wanted to spend a tenner on your crafting ever in your whole life, this is the best one you're ever going to spend. And you don't even need to spend a whole tenner because they're not even £10 worth. I've had hundreds of scissors in my life and these are just exceptional. Okay, so let's get cutting some stuff. What I'm going to do is introduce you to the snips, the trimmer, and various different adhesives. And I'm just going to give you like several tips and hints for each thing. I certainly can't tell you everything there is to do because I could be here all day. Right, first of all, when you're cutting out, if you're cutting out, let's say, this little bottle here, I'm going to suggest that you always cut out a little smallest but not the tiniest piece you can. You want a little bit of somewhere to hold either side if you possibly can, but the lighter the weight, we've taken off this weighty heavy bit, the lighter the weight, the more chance you have of getting a nice control on it. So rough cut it first, what I call rough cut it. Now, when you start to cut in, you want to look at the angles that you're going to try and go for. And I'm going to go first of all, because I'm right-handed, for this one here. Okay? And I forgot to tell you that, although I should have said, these are right and left-handed. So if you are left-handed, you can just snip away. You don't have to change. You don't have to have a special pair of scissors. And in fact, if you're sharing with someone, a right-hander and a left-hander, they're perfectly fine to move from one person to the other. And I totally forgot to say that. Sorry. So first of all, look at the angle at which you want to go in at. So I am going to start going in straight away at that angle. Okay, and that's my first cut. So I've got it nicely cut. Okay, now once you've gone in, this is where talking and doing this is not good. I should have kept cutting, so I'm going to try and go back in and just shave it a little tiny bit. So don't take your scissors off, okay? Go around the corner whilst you are still hold of the scissors. Okay, and we are not taking the scissors up from the page until we get close to the end, not right at the end, because if we wait till right to the end, it's a pain. Okay, so we're going to keep cutting for as long as we can and moving with this hand. So your right hand, or the cutting hand, so if you're a left-hander, it's your cutting left hand. For me, it's my right hand. You want to tuck your elbow into your body, which helps hold this hand here, this arm, nice and firm. Okay, it's a bit like when you take a photograph and you lean against the parapet of a bridge or something like that to steady your arm. So you're steadying your arm by tucking your elbow into your body, and you are not moving this arm. This arm stays almost like a completely solid, straight, not all tense, but it stays nice and stiff. And it's this hand, the loose hand, that you use to move and maneuver your papers. Okay, so depending on whether you're left or right, it'll be a different hand, but it's your scissor holding hand that you want to try and keep at a nice simple diagonal angle for cutting, and stationary, and all you're doing is maneuvering the snips up and down and up and down. So you're controlling the cut. Your other hand is controlling the movement of the item that you're cutting. Okay, so when you get to the end of your blade, what you want to try and do is stop on somewhere where there is a straight line. So I've just turned the corner. You don't want to stop on a corner. So I've just turned, and that allows me now to move this in on that straight line, which is a much easier place to reposition the blade. So I'm going round, and remember I said to leave that little bit of extra alongside, because it allows you just to lean over and reach over so that you've got a bit more control. Okay, and again we're going to go, and I'm going to look at the blade and think, yes, I can just get round the corner before I run out of blade. So I'm going to go around that corner, and now I'm going to push it back in on the straight. If I wasn't sure whether I was going to run out of blade or not, then I should have just readjusted. Okay, and there is one little bottle. Now, I did that quite slowly because I was talking at the same time. So let's cut ourselves out another. Now, remember I said to go in at an angle that suits the picture? So this time I'm going to go in at this angle here. Okay, so I'm going to come from over here. I'm not coming in this side, I'm coming in from over here, but as if I was coming in at the right angle straight away. Okay, and off I go, round we go, just to show you. I'm keeping my scissor blade on, and I am thinking, oh, there's a good straight bit to just readjust on. Okay, I'm going to get round this corner, and I'm thinking, here's a good place to readjust. And I'm now thinking this is beginning to get in my way. So what I'm going to do is just cut that across, okay? And that's because at the very beginning I didn't cut it tight enough. So here we go. I'm going back in here. I can find the place where the blades are. I can do that particularly well when I'm on the straight. I can't do it when I'm on the turn and the twirl and the twist. So much better to do it like that, okay? And there we have two little bottles cut out nice and neatly, ready to go. Okay, so that's how good those snips are and how wonderful they are. Now I want to just show you what happens if you're trying to cut something out, like for example these lovely handbags. Now that's great, I can cut them out in just exactly the same way. So here I go. In fact, I'm going to start here, watch, because I want to get that curve. Okay, now I have a problem. So what do I do here? Well, I'm going to go around the edge and around the top of the handle. Okay. Now here is, I've got a corner, okay, and I didn't show you corners before. So I'm going to snip into this corner, so let me just do that so that you can show you. So I'm going to snip right into that deep corner, and then I am going to be able to, because these are such lovely thin blades, I'm going to be able to turn that completely right angles. Okay, with other blades I'd be having to come in at a different angle. Now there's my shopping basket, and I'm just going to, where I was talking to you, I've just not cut that terribly well. There we go. Now, here's my problem. I've now got to get into this little bit here. Now I could stab it. I'm sure you've done this before and hurt your fingers. Stab it through and chip from inside. But what I like to do is to find a place within that where there is a natural line for your eye. Now, if you look across here, there is the line of the top of the bag. And that's a natural line that your eye sees. So if you cut through at exactly that place, okay, then your eyes are not going to be put off by you joining something there, because they're going to see that as a line anyway. And then I can go inside and I can now cut on the inside, okay, just as I have done the outside. And I've done that rather quickly, so I'm hoping it still looks neat and tidy. Oops. I might have to just cut a little tiny bit further that way. I was being cautious because I didn't want to cut the handle off. Okay. And now what happens is if I now stick that down and I put that back, it will look perfectly fine like these. Let me show you them nice and close. Okay. There's the one that's already been stuck down, the purple one. Okay. And here is the one that hasn't been stuck down, so I'm just going to stick it down for you and show you how. So a tiny bit of glue on the back of there. Okay, a tiny bit of glue on the back of there, and I'm now going to just push it down, make sure it's lined up. Okay. And now if you look carefully, you will find it almost impossible, unless you're a really, really cute-eyed person, to see that. And I'm going to show you another one here as a sample, just to continue to prove it. So I've cut out, ooh, mind the giraffe, I've cut out the lions with the balloons, okay, and I've cut them out differently. This one I've cut across here at the top. Can you see? There is where I've cut him through, to go into this little segment and cut this little segment out. So let's stick him down. Tiny spot of glue underneath. Let's stick that down, hold it down just long enough for it to stick nicely. And this one I've cut through at a different point. I've cut through this one here just above his hand, because it's another place where the things cross over, so it's less obvious. So let's stick him down. Okay, just a few dots. We're going to come on to sticky things in a minute, so just see, it's lots of little tiny dots that we need. We don't need big splodges of glue. Okay, and we're going to stick him side by side with his mate, and I'm just going to make sure that for both of them those little gaps are invisible. Now you and I know where those are cut through, but it's very, very hard to tell even when you're looking for it, and certainly when you've got a full card like that, you're never going to notice. So that's a great way of cutting out your little central pieces. Now that's fine until you want something that you want to maybe have up front and you don't want it to be flat and stuck down. So what you do with that, this little giraffe, I want to put him on dimensionals and make him stand out. So what I've done on the back of him is where I cut through there. Okay, I cut through there. Can you tell? Can you tell? Just about there. Okay, and again, because we've got such narrow blades on the snip, it doesn't force the paper sideways, which it would if you had a thicker pair of scissors. So in I went, cut out this little middle section. There you are, look, my hand underneath. And then what I've done on the back is I have put a little joining bar, and I've just cut a little tiny thin strip of card that won't be seen on the other side, and I've stuck that down, which allows me now to have that as a completely separate entity. It's not going to flap open, it's not going to be a problem, and I can now put him onto dimensionals safely. Okay, so that's a couple of tips on how to do that. Now the other thing is, if you are cutting, sorry, my little scribbly little notes. If you are cutting and you find that you've got a little area like this, for example, where you've kind of slightly missed the edge, because these little birds have quite a dark black line around them as part of the design. So I want you to consider that pens are a great help and assistance. Now they could be marker pens like this one, or they could be blender, the Stampin blends. So either type of markers are very good for this. So here we go. I am now going to use this brush tip, and I'm just going to use it on its end, on the edge, just a couple of runs across like this, a couple of runs across here, and by doing that I have now replaced that black line and it looks much smarter. Now you can also do this on the other side, and I've purposefully left a bit of a white line. Can you see I've left a bit of a white tatty bit? So equally, if you aren't very good with your scissors, you can just add a tiny little bit of marker. And can you see how we've now got rid of that white, that little white edge? There's a little piece there that I still haven't got rid of. Let's show you. Ooh, where's it gone? There. Okay. And that's a brilliant way to do it. Now the only problem we now have is, what do we do on these little pieces here where it's so thin? Let me get it under the... So it's so thin that if I cut right up into that, the chances are it's going to cut off. So this is what I'm going to suggest you do, is that you decide what colour you're going to put it down on. And here in this case I've decided I'm going to put it onto a mint macaron, because that's rather nice for the little bird. So I'm going to get my mint macaron, light mint macaron blender, and I am just going to colour it in mint macaron. Now it won't work to start with because this will be wet, so it will look too dark and it might show up. But I've got one here that I did earlier. I'll show you there. Ooh. Can you see where in between the two little buds I have coloured it in mint macaron? And now I can put it onto, because it's dry and you can see, I can put it onto my mint macaron background, and it doesn't look, it doesn't show. It looks like I've cut right the way around them. So not only can you cut really nice and tight with your snips, but you can also add extras with your pens. And again with this one, can you see there's little bits of white there? So I might want to go around the edges of this and make sure it was nice and black all the way around, which gives you, as you can see on the bird, here we are where we went round that extra, it gives him a lovely clear surround. So use your pens in coordination with your snips. Okay, now if you get to a point where you really can't manage all the little bits, so for example this lovely turtle, I love this turtle, he's got little teeny weeny toes. Now going in and out of those teeny weeny toes, even with the snips, is kind of a challenge. But also he has two little eyebrows that are actually not even within the boundaries of the image. So we're now going to do something called fuzzy cutting. So first of all I'm going to rough cut him out, because I don't want all three, I only want the one. Okay, so I only want the one, so I've now got him roughly cut out so he's not going to overbalance, and we're going to fuzzy cut. Now I call it fuzzy cutting sometimes, and I'll tell you why. Originally, when I was starting up crafting many moons ago, it was called fuzzy cutting with a Z, and that was because from the tailoring business, the fuzzy cut is the cut that you do around the edge of a pattern to allow for a seam allowance. So in other words, where you've got the designer designs the pattern which will make the perfect dress or the perfect shirt, and then they allow an additional amount for a seam allowance, and that's to stop oh, excuse me, that's to stop the material from going fuzzy. So that seam allowance allows you to finish the edges nicely and they don't go fuzzy. And that's where the Z came in. Now, I don't know why, but over time, gradually, it's become fussy cutting, which makes less sense because actually we're not going to be fussy about our cutting. We're going to be much more loose and relaxed about our cutting. So whether you call it fuzzy or fussy, doesn't matter, but you want to be a little more loose. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the whole image and we're going to cut it out with the equivalent of a seam allowance, so a little bit of extra all the way around the edge. So what I want you to do is start exactly the same way as we did before. So I'm coming in at this angle because I want to get this little area. Okay, I'm going to give it quite a big seam allowance on this occasion just so that it's more obvious to you. I probably wouldn't do quite such a deep. Okay, and now as I go round, I know I need to go in and out of here and I'm running out of blades, so remember we're stopping. Now what I'm doing is I am allowing a little bit of extra all the way around. I'm not going in and out of every single toe, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to watch for the actual pattern and the design of the picture. So I am going to mimic it. Can you see there where I've just gone in and out? And again, we're going to go right round his fingers. Okay, and can you see how what I've done here, here we go, I've mimicked the round the feet, I've mimicked the shape of his knee, and I've mimicked the flatness of his shell. Because if I don't do that, then you lose the shape of the design underneath. So yet again, I'm going to go in here, oops. Of course, I wouldn't normally have stopped at that point. Now, I don't want to go right in here by his beak, so I'm going to look out for where his beak's coming, and I'm going to come up and around his beak. Now, because we've got two eyebrows, I want to show that there are two, so I'm going to just give it a little tiny dent. And can you see what I meant by mimicking? There we go. I'm mimicking where those two were going to come, so I want a little dip in between to show that there are definitely two of them. I'm going to mimic that. I'm going to come around here. I'm going to give this a cut. And as ever, I'm going to finish him off. So we have now fussy cutted, or fuzzy cutted, this little turtle. But all the way around the edge, we've mimicked the design and the pattern to give that feeling of shape, rather than just cutting a big blob all the way around the edge of him. And I want to show you how different that would be if we just cut. So I'm going to use one of the others, and I'm going to just cut an amount all the way around the edge of this one, but I'm not going to mimic the design. I'm just going to literally cut it out. And actually, there is quite a difference. There we go. There is quite a difference. In this one, you can really see the shape of the turtle. In this one, you see the turtle on a blob. Okay? And that's how we do it. And likewise, we could, if we wanted to, we could get a granny apple green, because this is a beautiful granny apple green card, and we could colour the edge of the turtle in that granny apple green. We could colour the fuzzy or the fussy edge in that green, and that would also help him to sort of lie into that surface if we wanted to. But that's another whole host of things for you to think about. Okay? Right, here's another little tip and a trick. When you're doing your envelopes, it's lovely to be able to put a little banner mark or something similar on them. And so also if you're doing little greetings and what have you, it's also nice to have banners. So I want to show you how to do a banner end, okay? All you do is you cut down the middle a certain length. Doesn't matter, depends on how long you want that split to be. But because you're cutting down the very centre, what will now happen if we cut from the corner into that centre point, and we cut from the other corner into that center point. We now have a really neat, level, equal banner. Okay, so that's another little tip and a trick to do with your snips. Don't try and do your banner rough hand. Go from the middle first and then cut into that point, and then you will have lovely, neat, beautiful, sharp, equal banners. Okay, and the last thing I want just to tell you is something not to do with your snips. If you can avoid it, your snips will cut glimmer and glitter papers beautifully. There's no problem. In fact, I'll show you. Ooh, I don't like doing this. Right. They will cut it beautifully, but because, listen, sorry if I've put all you people on edge, it's rough, it's not nice. So I tend, where possible, to use my very cheap scissors, and that's why I have a cheap pair of scissors, to use when I'm cutting glimmer paper, because it will eat into the blades. These blades are strong and brilliant, but eventually little bits and nasty sandpaperiness is not going to do them a great deal of good. So if you're doing a lot of cutting with glimmer paper, try and use a cheaper pair of scissors if you possibly can. Okay, so that is the snips, and I really think for less than a tenner you really have to come to my shop and you have to buy a pair, because they're just brilliant. Okay, so let's go on to the trimmers, and at the moment we have a super teeny one, which is a guillotine, and it takes, I want to show you, a 6x6 piece of paper really easily, and it chops beautifully, and it chops teeniest, weeniest bits if you wanted. Look how teeny that piece is. Look how beautifully it's cut that. So it cuts like an absolute dream, and it's, as long as you're cutting things that are under 6 inches, this is absolutely fabulous. Now I'm going to disappoint you and say you can't buy it in the catalogue at the moment. I don't know whether you will in the future. I suspect you may be able to, but at this point in time, the only way you can get this is to join my team. So go to gillyhunt.com. It will explain how to get hold of one of these. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, because you may not want to join the team and you may not be able to get hold of that. But do think about the team, because it's a great deal. It's an amazing deal. So let's go on to our bigger trimmer, and I'm just pausing because I've got to get things off from the side here. Let's move everything out of the way. Now I can't get this trimmer totally onto the page, I'm afraid, underneath the cameras. So I'll do my best to show you every little bit of it as we go. First and foremost, it will take a full 12x12 sheet, and it will take the 12 by sheet right to the end with a little bit of space, so you're not so jammed up that you can't move it around a bit. And it will also, it also has at the side here simply a pull out, and I'm trying to get this so that you can see most of it. You can't see the end of it because it's too long. Extending arm. So not only can we do a 12 by 12, but we can go right out to 17 inches measured. And of course, because this is an open-ended, there's no closed end here, you can actually cut, if you can get hold of paper, there's even longer than 17 inches, okay? But it will do a 12 by 12. And it will do that beautifully. So let's just get that out of the way. And I'm going to close the arm, and I just want to show you the arm rotates from this point here, and it pushes in, and it clips into place at the other end. It just clips in here. Ooh, here we go. Okay, now just a little word of warning. It clips in easily. You saw how easily I did it. It just whizzes in, clip. But it is also quite easy to just slightly have it up as you come in. And if you have it up as it comes in, it doesn't quite clip in place. Right, see here, it's not quite clipped in. Now, if it doesn't clip in, what it will do is put some pressure on this junction. So be careful that you just make sure it, and you can hear it when it clicks in place. Make sure it's nice and flat and it clicks. Okay, now it's thin. I want to show you how thin it is. It's very narrow, it's very lightweight, it's about half the weight of the original ones that we've had before, and it also has an amazingly strong non-bendy surface. With all that thinness, we have these wonderful little bars and ridges on the back, which are allowing for like a honeycomby sort of structure on the back, which completely means that there's no twist and turn to this. This is a good solid platform. And in fact, I sometimes use it on my knee, which is not great. It's best to use it on a tabletop, but it's so nice and solid that you can use it in other ways. So first and foremost, it's flat. It measures in centimetres, it measures in inches. It has a cutting blade, which is this dark blade, which has a little triangle to remind you that that's the sharp one. And the light grey one, which has a little dot, to show you that this is the scoring blade. Okay, so we have one that will score and one that will cut. And they both go up and down the thing, but have enough space for you to hide away the blade that you don't want to use. So you can run the one that you don't want to use right out of the way and use the other one. And these blades are easy to clip in and out, so I want just to show you how easy they are to clip in and out. Now this is your cutting line where your blades run along, okay, and one end has the little handle which allows you to hook it onto the wall and have a little hook on the nail on the wall that you can clip it over, which I love, or you could put it on a string. But also along this, so from this end going down to the other end, as we work our way along, let me bring it in, towards the other end, just a little way in, and it's almost level with where the centimetre numbers are, okay, there is a little notch, and I'm going to try and show you this, and this is really hard to show you on camera. Let me try. Ooh. Bear with me, right. Don't know whether you can see. There is a tiny little piece. There it is. Can you see there? Just there, where I've put a black mark, there is a little notch, a little V shape, very tiny V shape, on both sides of that. And that's where you pop your blades in and out. Now, it's very hard to see, and that's why I put, when I find it, I put a little black mark of marker pen, and I've used just a Sharpie marker to mark that, which means that I can tell very quickly where to put them in and out, because I can see that nice and clearly. So all you do is you get to that point, and you just, can you see as I pulled it up, it just popped out. Okay, back in, clip, clip, and in it goes. It's back in. Watch again. So as I come up to here, I'm just going to lift, and that lifting, I'm not putting it really lots of pressure, it's just a very gentle lift, and then I run it along and lift again, and the two little pieces come out. And now it's out, you can have a look at the blade. So let me find a piece of white that we can see this against. This blade is very, very sharp. It's an amazingly wonderful blade. It's also two-sided. You'll notice it's equally the same on both sides. And that means that you get double your buck for your bang for your buck, whatever it is. This is the phrase. I can't remember what the phrase is. You get more for your money, because actually it will cut going one way and it will cut going the other way. So you actually get a two-sided blade, which means that when you've run it lots and lots of times in one direction, because we all tend to have one direction that we work with most of the time, then you can take it out, turn the whole thing round, clip it back in, and the other side of the blade may well still be really nice and sharp. Okay, so let me show you how well they cut first of all. So what we're going to do is we're running the scoring blade up to the top so it's out of the way, and we're going to use the cutting blade. And I'm going to try and cut 3. I say try, and you'll see why in a moment. Well, you may see why. So I've got 3 pieces of our reasonably bulky cardstock, Okay. And this is why I said I'm going to try. We get two beautifully sharp, fab. I want to show you these edges. I want to show you how, I do if I can get them in, how sharp and clean those edges are. So we get two perfectly clean edges. And then we get a third one that's been attempted. Now, depending on how thick your cardstock is, sometimes you can get a third. This one we haven't really quite gone through. It's just got left behind on the last. But considering this is marketed as a paper trimmer and I'm putting through thick card, the wonderful thing is it will do 2 sheets of card. Why is that important? Because sometimes we want to make card stock and we want to fold a piece of card, but obviously bigger than this, and we then want to be able to just trim up the edges so that they're neat and tidy. And look how easily, this does it. Okay, we can get a beautiful little, I mean this is a little teeny mini one, but if you were doing that with a big one, there is no fussiness, no fuzziness, absolutely crisp, clean edges on that. And that's 2 layers of cardstock, so absolutely brilliant for making your card bases. Right, if I want to use Whisper White, I've now got 4 sheets. So let's go for 4, shall we? Now you can feel that that was harder. I could feel that it was trying harder, but it has actually managed to do 4 for us. So I don't suggest that you try and ram lots of cardstock through, but it does mean that you can be absolutely assured of a stunningly sharp, crisp, clear edge if you're only using it for 1 or possibly 2. Okay, so I want to just give you a couple of hints and tips now as to how to use your trimmer. The first thing I want to just share with you is that sometimes we don't end up with really nice bits of card. This one obviously isn't square, it's been used for other things. But sometimes also when we buy new card, it isn't completely square. I have to say, Stampin' Up! I have no problem with their square, but sometimes if you've got other card, hate to mention that, it may not be totally squared. So, and it may not be totally squared with your trimmer. So I'm going to suggest that whatever you do, you make and establish a right angle before you do your work. So take one tiny piece off, run it round. So there's the piece we've taken off. Now run it to here. And take another piece off. Now we know this is a right angle. So anything we do with those 2 sides up at the plate will be, as long as we always put things right up against the guide at the top here, and this guide plate is a ridge so that you can butt it up to that nice and easily. So now if I cut here, I know, as long as I'm keeping that card nicely butted in, I know that this is going to be a perfect rectangle. Absolutely perfect, right? Because all the sides are going to be parallel and all the angles are going to be right angles. So think about that when you're doing it. Think about butting it up, creating a straight line and making your first right angle and then work from that, okay? Now you'll notice that I was working both directions. A couple of things to think about. When you're a beginner, if you are butting it up to the edge, it's a good idea, I'll do this so that you can see it, to run the blade out of the way as you close it so that you can come and push in this direction. Now why this direction? Because that way, if you're not holding it quite well enough, as that goes that way, it's pushing the paper in towards the the guide. So I can even take my hand off, and that will now push into the guide, and you will get that perfect rectangle, right angle. If you're doing it the other way and you're coming this way, it's pulling it away from the guide. Now that's fine if your hand is well and truly in place and you're pushing against it, you'll be stronger. But watch what happens. That's not going to do it for once. Sometimes it will pick your paper up and it will just move it even just a fraction away. And that way you don't quite get that right angle correct. So as a beginner, and it's good practice, I would always cut in towards, so that it's pushing the paper in towards the guideline. Okay, now you've been watching me clipping this in and out. When you get it to start with, it is a little bit stiff. It's supposed to clip down and hold down, so that when you're carrying it around, it's not going to be flipping and flapping out of the way. So sometimes you just have to put your hand on the edge here and just move. There's a little ridge beautifully for your fingers to go on, and just clip it in and out. Once, like me, you've been using it a long time, you can often just pick it up anyway, but sometimes it sticks. And that's a good thing, because you want it to stick, because that way when you're carrying it, look, if I do that and wibble it about, it's not flapping about, and it's not, if it wasn't clipped, and it automatically clips itself back down when you drop it, but if not, it would have wobbled about. Okay, so that's what we need to do for that. And once you have all of those things in place, now you can start cutting your bases and cards and getting going. So I'm just going to tell you that if you want to, here's another little tip. Now I think I've shown this before on another video, so forgive me if you've already seen it, but I like to mark a point if I want to make squares or if I want to make batches of cards. So let me show you. Let's just move this. So I'm using just washi tape. You'll notice that on my trimmer I often have lots of washi tape bits. I'm going to just mark it. So let's say we want a 2-inch square. So I'm going to just put my piece of tape along the 2-inch spot. Let's bring in my, let's not waste a big huge piece, let's have a smaller piece. Hold on a moment. So I'm going to bring this in. First of all, what are we going to do? We're going to push a straight edge along here, and we're going to establish a right angle. So we now know we've got a right angle. Okay, and now I'm going to push this up to that marker. And up to that marker again. And I know that's going to be a perfect square. It may not be a 2-inch square. It may be a 2.005 millimeter square. It might be, it might have just a tiny bit more or a tiny bit less, but it will be a square because I've gone up to that mark, and that's what's important. So when you're doing things like box making, and it's important to have it absolutely parallel and square so that when the sides fold in, it folds perfectly, you can be certain you've got it square. It's a bit like when you stand on weighing scales, and you know, if you're like me and you're slightly chunkier than you should be, you know, you can kind of cheat by looking from the left or to the right, and you can kind of change your weight by maybe half an ounce or a pound or so, or if you're lucky you can get a pound out of it. It's by looking from the left or looking from the right, because the marker itself just comes and goes one way or the other. Well, the same happens here. If we're not careful, we can be very slightly tipped to one side, and we can add an extra 1/8 or a 1/16 of an inch or a couple of millimeters. So by using that as somewhere to butt up to, I can be certain that I'm getting the same exact measurement. Okay, so that's another little tip. So end of tips and tricks. I'm just going to show you what else you can buy to go with your trimmer, and that's a set of blades. Now I have They come in a pack of 4 like that, and they are, I can't remember the exact price, I think it's £11 or £12. You'll have to look it up. Go to gillyhunt.com and have a look. And what I do though, look, have you noticed, is I put some tape on mine. These two have no tape on, so I know they're brand new. These have got little bits of tape on because at times I use one for if I want an absolutely perfect finish on something, and I know that my blade has been used quite a few times. I will then use one of these, which I've already used a tiny bit, but not very often. Okay, and if you go back to my basics, B for basics, you'll find out why they have tips on for the black card. Okay, so I'm now going to go to, I've done all my extra sharp, and I'm going to go to the extra sticky. And I want just to show you some extra sticky things that we sell. So we sell wet glue, we sell tear tape, we sell dimensionals, which are little sticky pads. I'll show you these all in a minute in more detail. We sell mini glue dots and snail tape and foam adhesive strips and fine tip glue and craft sheets and many other things. But I'm just going to introduce you to the basics today. So let me put those all out of the way and we'll come to them in a minute. We're going to stick with some fine glue. Now the glue itself is good and strong, and I want to show you how little you need. And in fact I'm just going to do it on a piece of coloured card. I was going to use this, but I'm just changing my mind at the last minute. I'm going to show you it on a piece of coloured card, because what you need when you're using is just a few small dots. And in fact, the cleverer you are, the smaller the dots, the better. Okay, and that will stick down. Let me show you. Let's take a piece of card, stick it down. And we'll put my fingers on it. That's not clever. Okay, that will stick down, and that within a few minutes will be solid. Now, the nice thing with wet glue is that it does give you a couple of seconds to move things. So let me just show you. Let's just show you with a piece of granny apple green. So this time I'm just going to put a few on the sides. Okay, and this time I want it to be there, and oh look, I've put it slightly diagonally. Oops, let's move it. So we want it to be straight. So I have a little bit of movement at the early days. I don't have movement for very long, but just in those early days I do have a little bit of movement. Now the other thing is, once you've moved it, you may, like me, have got just a little bit of the sort of edge oozing out. Can you see there? There's just a little bit oozing out. Okay, now I'm going to take a cocktail stick and I'm going to run it along that edge. And because it's wood, look, it picks up the spare glue. So there's a little tip for you. If anything oozes out, get there quick whilst it's still wet, and you can just tidy up that line, and nobody will know. Once that's dry, nobody will know that you've had a bit of a spill. Okay, so wet glue, I would advise you to use wet glue for almost everything. It's wonderful, it's solid, it works well, it works on all kinds of surfaces, including metal, wood, plastics, acrylics. Brilliant. So I use glue for almost everything I ever do, except, in my opinion, for when you want really nice flat surfaces sticking down. So what we tend to call matting and layering. So this is the mat, which is the piece of card, and we're going to layer it. So matting, layering, and we're going to mat. Here's another mat made of paper, and we're going to layer this down onto that. And I want to show you a real trick of how to do this. So this is my absolute top tip for everybody. We're going to use tear tape, and tear tape, really this is where its perfect home is, because You know we had that little spillage and squeeze out the side? Well, the wonderful thing with tear tape is that you can get it right up to the edge. Watch. Ooh, got a hair there. So I'm going to go right up to this edge here. And I can lay it right along the very, very, very edge. And it tears. Watch. If I put my finger there and I tear against it, it tears off. You can cut it if you want a really straight edge, but I can promise you tearing is perfectly fine. So right along the very edge, put your finger on the end, pull it up towards you. Just pull it sideways and it will tear off. Pop it down, pull it along and tear. Okay, now the advantage over the glue is that that is going to stick every single millimetre all the way along, with the few exceptions where I didn't cut it off quite well. If you want to be absolutely perfection person, then of course what you do is you run it slightly over the edge like I did there, but you run it much further over the edge and then you chop it. But I don't think that's vital, to be honest. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, that will ensure that every last millimetre of your edge will be totally flat and totally stuck down. And if you've got a big wide piece like this, you might add a few dots of glue in the middle too, just to make it totally solid in the middle, but I don't think you need to until you get quite a lot bigger than this. So now here's my tip and trick. What we're going to do is we're going to flick the edge and put it down. Now lots of people have real trouble getting this up and off. So what I'm going to say to you is the first thing you need to do is you need to push it down. If you don't have nails, I'm going to suggest you get yourself a bone folder, which is great for folding card and paper too. But you can press quite hard with a bone folder over the edge of that without damaging your card. And if you do that on all of your edges, okay, all of your edges you bone folder, or you do use your nail, but you can bone fold easily. They will be much easier to pull up, much easier to pull up. If you're still struggling with that, then we have the picket tool. And this is a wonderful tool which will do lots and lots of things. This end will pick up embellishments for you, and this end has a palette knife and a sharp pokey tool. And here's where the palette knife is brilliant, because you can use it as if it were your thumbnail. So you can run it along and up will come that's edge really easily. So if you don't have nails, a picket tool is a great one. Now you'll also notice that I ran that along the edge here, okay, like that, to pick it up. I didn't try and flick it from the end, because from the end it is harder to do it. So it's always best, if you can, to just run it slightly sideways to pick it up. Okay, there's a little, and that's the same when you're using your nail or anything else. Now here's where what I'm going to do is a bit of a trick and a tip. What I've now done, you'll notice, is I have folded, picked up and then folded back the corners just on two of the corners. So this piece, which goes all the way along here, is folded back. This piece, which goes along here, is folded back. This piece and this piece. So every single piece that you've put down has now got a little end sticking out that you can pull. Okay, now we're going to bring in our card that we want to stick it down on. Now, because you've only exposed those little corners, you have now got the ability to move this around a lot. Now, if you'd pulled all the tape off, by the time you'd done that, the whole thing would have been stuck down at a funny angle. So I can just move this around lots. I can put my fingers on the corners where I know that they aren't so sticky. So this corner and this corner where they're not sticking out, I know are nice, and I can make that just where I want it. And this is quite hard under the camera because I can't see from totally above. Then I put my hand nice and firmly on the card and I pull, that now is a totally sticky stuck side. And because that's totally stuck, all the rest can be pulled out and it's not going to have moved. It's going to be lovely and flat and perfect. So I can do the same with this one. Just to remind you, each of the pieces that we put down, we've folded one end of them back so that we've got one sticky corner and another sticky corner, but all the rest is non-sticky still. So as I put it down, I can maneuver it. I can just choose where I want it to settle. Okay, and I can now pull out one of those stickies. Now you just have to pull it a little bit gently because then it doesn't snap off. But okay, and another one, just push that down, and another one, push it down, and another one, push it down. And I now have two mats and layers perfectly stuck down, flat as a pancake, brilliantly tight, and much better than if I'd have used glue, because every last little tiny bit is stuck down. Okay, so it's up to you, but I think that's where tear tape comes into its own. You can use tear tape for lots of other things. It's basically double-sided tape which you stick down and you pull away the surface to allow it to be double-sided. So it can be used for sticking down all kinds of things. Now the only other thing that I would highly recommend it for, it's not that I don't recommend it for the other things, but this is something that I highly recommend it for, is for making double-sided ribbons. So for example, I can run this along the ribbon at the back. Let me show you, let's just cut it off. Okay, so a piece of ribbon. I've just run the tear tape all the way down. Sorry, I keep knocking the camera today. And now I'm going to just get the end off. And I've now got a piece of double-sided ribbon that I can stick down. Let's stick it down onto here. Okay. And it makes beautiful double-sided ribbon. Easy peasy. So that's another thing that tear tape is particularly good for. Right, let's move on. So that's tear tape introduced. Now, how about some dimensionals? These are dimensionals. And what on earth are these, you say? Funny little things. I'll just getting hold of a few things here just to show you. Dimensionals are little sticky pads. Okay, let me show you. This side, can you hear the stickiness? And this side has a little piece of protective paper on top. And you just peel that off, and that now becomes a double-sided bit of sticky. And I've now stuck my fingers together. It's really quite, you can see by pulling my skin, they are quite strong. I can get my fingers off, I promise you. Okay, and they're so sticky I can put it back and it will still it will still stick to something else. Now you'll also notice that mine come with a whole load of funny wonky lines on. When you get yours, there'll be lovely clean white sheets like this bit. Okay, but I have a great tip that I'm passing on from my wonderful friend Baz, who is a wonderful crafter and a very generous lady, and she said, why not do this? And I'll tell you, well, let me just show you why first. Hold on, before I give you the tip. When you start using these sticky pads and you start putting them down on something, and I say to you, okay, now take the tops off to make them sticky. Now I've taken the tops off. No, I'm not going to show you. Okay, I've taken the tops off one of those. Now it is actually quite hard to see which one. If I come up really close, then you might be able to see that that one is more sticky and these have still got their tops on. Take them off. Oh yes, look, that one's... So they're quite hard to tell. But if I had them like that, I would know for certain that that one still had its top on because it's got a black line on it. So I would know for certain that that was got one on. So I wouldn't be sticking my fingers on and testing. I would know for certain. So here's a little thing to do. When you get a new pad, get yourself a permanent marker, a Sharpie marker, a blender, whatever you like. I tend to use just a permanent black marker. And run a black marker down the middle, so it's easier to see on the big ones, down the middle of the run of the little hexagons. And that way you will have a little black mark on the back of your pads when you stick them down, so you'll be able to identify that they're down. Okay, so here's what these will do. Here's what these wonderful little things will do. They can make your card beautifully three-dimensional. Now this is quite hard to show you on a camera, but can you tell that, for example, his little wing, where is it? His little wing sticks out quite a long way. His beak sticks out from the others. This sits above the background, and it gives you wonderful, lovely three-dimensional pictures. You can see it quite clearly here, actually, at this end, where you've got the shadows from the light. So if you're wanting 3 dimensions, this is your guy. These are your guys to help you. Now, if you only use one underneath, just one simple one, so this has just got one under there, you'll be able to see it sideways on. It's got several, but it's only one layer. If you only use one layer, these are quite fine to go through the UK Postal Service. As soon as you go more than one high, which I'm going to show you in a moment, then you need to either hand deliver or put them into a special delivery of some description. Okay, but normal post, one high, that's fine. So let me show you what they're going to do. I'm going to bring you in just some bits here. We're going to make a little quick card using the dimensionals. So first of all, the dimensionals themselves, I've already stuck on this particular little toucan. Okay, and I've also stuck them on the back of this little toucan. And they come in, as you will notice already, 2 sizes. One which is the large and one which is small. Because what you don't want is the ends showing. Now you can always cut them, okay, and you can cut the edges and use the edges too, but it's very useful to have 2 different sizes. So I've used the little ones on the bill where it might have just gone over the edge, and on the tails. Now what I want to do is I want one of these to stick out even more. So I'm going to first of all take the edges off, the tops off. And again, you might want to use that take a pick tool if you don't have nails. Okay, so there you go. Now I want to make him really stick up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put an extra one on top of each of the ones that I've just done. Okay, so that's an extra one on top. So we're now 2 layers high. Okay, and I'm going to take them off. There we go. And I'm now going to stick him over here. And now you can see how beautifully he stands out from his little buddy. Okay, he stands out beautifully, doesn't he? Really nicely. And I'm just going to put the one single layer on this one. And I'm going to put him down on this side. So we've got 3 different levels. We've got the little chap who was already stuck down. We've got one that's got a slight shadow around it, which just stands out a bit more, and one that really punches and stands out. And I've also done the back, because I want this to stand out from that background. I want to get a really lovely 3-dimensional feel to this card. Now, when you're watching YouTube videos, you'll often see people just put one in each corner. 1, 2, 3, stick it down. Well, that's because, and I do the same when I'm doing some of my videos, because we want to get something done quickly and we want to show you and move on. But normally you really need to have at least all 4 corners, and you don't want to go right into the corner because otherwise you will see the whiteness. So you want to be just in a tiny bit from the corner. You want them roughly spaced, 1 inch to 1/2 inch across, because that way when you push down from above, which is the important bit, you're not going to get dips and hollows. You're going to get it nicely raised all the way evenly across. So don't be put off by people on YouTube videos, including myself, only using a very few. You really do, if you possibly can, want to have a nice even distribution of them all the way across. Okay, let me just, and now you can see how important it is that that lovely idea of Baz's is, because I still know I've just got 3 more to go, because I can see the stripe. So even if the phone rang and I had to run off, I'd still know which ones I had still left to take off. Okay, and then I'm just going to pop this down on there. And not only have you got the wonderful textured background, but you've also got the 3 dimensions. And that makes this little guy really stand out. He stands out because of the contrast of his hat with the background, but also because he is actually well forward of everybody else. Okay, so that's what dimensionals can do for you. And you can go mad and you can make amazing, exciting boxes using dimensionals. And in fact, I was going to do one more with dimensionals, sorry. Oh, I was going to finish off. Let's wait. I was going to finish off, you know, we cut these out earlier on. I was going to show you how I could finish those off too. So let's do it. Okay, I'm going to pop 1 on each end of my barrel. And remember I said we don't want it to dent in the middle, so I'm going to put 3 across there. And let's just finish off this card. It would be a shame not to, wouldn't it? Okay, thinking of you, we've layered it up, we cut the banner, we've added our dimensionals, and we're now going to add small dimensionals. Where are they? Here we go. We're going to add a couple of small dimensionals to the little perfume bottles. And I'm going to add 2 because I don't want it dipping and diving. And I'm now going to do something which is nearly impossible to do, but I'm going to try. Watch me make a mess of this. I'm going to try, oops, and this is because the snips are so good. I want to cut one in half because I only want a teeny little half on the top underneath that stopper. Okay, so here we go, pop them off. And I'm going to add a couple of extras. And these extras will just stand out from the crowd a little bit because they've got a dimensional underneath them. And that will help kind of add more of this lovely lipstick red to my composition, I suppose we'd call it. My design. Anyway, there we go. Okay, back to the mini dots. This is the last of the ones I'm wanting to show you, really. Mini dots are little sticky dots of glue on a little sticky backed, well, not sticky backed, almost like a greaseproofy backed backing paper. So let me see if I can get it. There we go. There's the little dot. Can you see? It's a dot of sticky, gooey stuff. Here it is on the end of my fingernail. It's totally transparent and wonderful, so you can't see it. I'm going to stick it back on because we want it to be on there. You can pick them up with a picky tool or a cocktail stick and then use them and manipulate them that way, or on the end of your nail as I just did. But the easiest way of all is to do something like a bow, is to use the back of whatever it is you're going to stick and just press it onto that. And that has now picked it up. It's now stuck on the back of my bow. Can you see? And I'm going to pop my bow on here. And I'm now going to add, because I want to show you that the brilliant thing about glue dots is that they will stick ribbon, wood, plastic, metal. So here's a lovely little metal embellishment. Stick it on, give it a good press, pull it off. There it is, stuck to the back. and that will now also, it also does the brilliant job of sticking things that are not papers to things that are not papers. So metals to ribbons, ribbons to wood, wood to metals, and so on and so on. And all I've done each time, if you noticed, was to fold this back. So I folded it back to expose the next dot. I folded it back to expose the next dot. Now, it's good practice to just pull that off and get rid of it as you're going along. Underneath there will be the next little dot to fold back to. Okay? So those will hold beautifully, strongly and wonderfully. And here I'm going to do something else with my, the last bit of my chat with you. I want to just show you, there we go. I want to just show you that sometimes when you have little tiny embellishments, although these are sticky back and they will stick beautifully to paper and card, sometimes the sticky backs just find it a little bit harder to stick to metal or wood. And so I tend to put a little tiny dot of glue down and then stick my sticky back embellishment in place. So there you are. What a pretty little tag that is, all stuck down beautifully and solidly, and that can be banged about like mad, and it's going to be fine. Okay, now the last thing I want to just talk about are the other things. We do have snail tape, and I'm going to show you how it works, but I am also going to admit that I very, very rarely use snail. It is brilliant for quick sticking. So watch this. Zoomp. That's stuck, and not only stuck, but really I can bash it about. That's really well and truly stuck. So it is brilliant, absolutely fabulous. I wouldn't have anything said against it, but I do find that it's quite expensive in comparison with your tear tape and your glues, and it basically does very similar jobs. So although I would buy it, if you want to get a really lovely, smooth, sharp, well stuck, fast card, it's great. And you will see a lot of YouTubers and demonstrators using snail glue because it is quick and it's also non-sticky, and you don't get it on your hands and you don't get it messy. So it's great for those people that want something, that want something stuck instantly and quickly. So if you're demonstrating, it's a fabulous glue. It's not as fabulous when you take it price for price with the other glues. So it's up to you. I'm certainly not going to diss it or say it's terrible. The only thing you need to remember is the glue itself is on a tape. Don't know whether you can see the tape, it's so see-through. Anyway, there is tape, I promise you, underneath there. There it is, you can just see it shining. It's on a tape, and that tape is sticky, and therefore it has a little clip lid which you flick open and pop down. And there's some ridges on the top, which is where you put your finger, so you know you've got the tape the right way round. So click that to protect the stickiness, clip it back, and on the opposite side you'll find the ridges, which is where you put your finger to run it across. And these are replaceable. Whoops, there we go. This tape mechanism is replaceable, so you don't need to have the whole of, if you're into saving the planet, then, which we all should be, I shouldn't say it as flippantly as that, should I? And that's another reason why I don't tend to use this so much, because it does have a lot of plastic around it. You can just replace the central pieces, and you will need to do it. This one roughly is about actually halfway through, because you can see this is the unused tape, so this is all sticky, and eventually it spools round and it collects on this spool here, which looks see-through. So when the see-through one is all full and this blue part is empty, that's when you need to replace it, and you just pop them in. It almost just goes into place without you really having to do very much, just clips in. There we go. Okay, you can feel that it will clip, especially if you're looking for the ridges at the top. Okay, so that was my quick guide, there are also foam adhesive strips, there's fine tip glue, there's silicone craft sheets, and many other things that you might find that are either sharp or sticky, including punches and die cuts. But we're going to look at punches and die cutting things later in my A to Z all by themselves. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope it's given you some ideas and tips and got you confident to know which one to pick up for which jobs. Any comments? I'm more than happy to answer questions if you're unsure and you have a personal one. Please let me know. I would love to know, to hear from you. Thanks very much. Bye bye.